You wake up one day and realize that the good guys aren't good at all. Their blades still in their sheaths, smiles hiding knives, caresses with the force of a guillotine. Jung, with the air of a chronicler of the apocalypse, wrote that there is nothing more terrifying than the moment when the empath, the one everyone considers a docile lamb, stops crying and begins to see. Not a rupture, but an awakening. Not fragility, but a metamorphosis that overturns tables, bonds, and certainties. You thought you had an emotional cushion beside you, but instead you find yourself facing a surgeon of the soul, with a gaze as sharp as a razor-sharp blade. If you don't want to miss this journey into the most disturbing folds of the psyche, leave a like now. You sit in the crowd, convinced you're the most fragile of the herd, yet you're the cruelest experiment humanity has ever conducted. You've been taught to collect other people's emotional fragments, as if you were the official village garbage can. The screams of drunks, the betrayals of spouses, the tears of hysterical relatives. You absorb them all, silent, like a medieval sponge soaked in stale beer and guilt. Jung, in his dusty, despair-filled notebooks, noted that empaths weren't fragile. They were repositories of pain. Emotional shock absorbers, we'd call them today, but he saw them as involuntary monks, forever kneeling before the sins of others. And the best part, they even apologized. They apologized for existing, for breathing, for not being good enough to heal wounds that were never their own. But here's the part that made his blood run cold. You don't just suffer, you study. You observe every outburst of anger, every carefully crafted lie, every perfectly polished betrayal. And without realizing it, you accumulate data. Like a silent chronicler, you note fears, weaknesses, flaws. You write not on parchment, but in bones. And those bones have become an archive of possible vendettas. And here comes the moment no one expects, the snap. Not the snap of the bones, but of the mind. That internal click that transforms the lamb into a pathologist of the soul. You don't scream, you don't push, you don't throw knives, you simply tell the truth. And every word is a scalpel. The others expected tears, but instead find a diagnosis. They thought they had a victim, but instead they find a surgeon who has memorized every vein to be severed. The dramatic turn of events doesn't come with a bolt of lightning, but with a banal gesture, a letter found in a drawer, an emptied bank account, a secretly read message. It's then that you realize that the person you defended like a blind crusader has planted a spear squarely in your chest. It's not the betrayal itself that burns, it's the mockery. Because you knew it. You always knew it. The sidelong glances, the suspended silences, the wrong smiles, you had already filed them all away. Yet, like a well-trained idiot, you chose to ignore them. Jung noted this paradox with the air of someone measuring poison drop by drop. The real trauma is not the act, but the awareness of having seen it coming and having remained silent. Translated, you weren't blind, you were too lucid, and now your lucidity is a guillotine descending silently. And here's the part that terrified the abusers. You don't explode. You don't make a scene. You don't throw plates. You don't write tearful letters. You become calm. Eerily calm. The perpetrators expect chaos. They find silence. And in that silence, you begin to speak. Every word is a notarial act. You did this on such and such a day at such and such a time for such and such reasons. Insults aren't needed, only the truth. And the truth, when delivered with surgical precision, is more devastating than any revenge. It is in that moment that the empath becomes what Jung called psychologically complete. Not a saint, not a martyr, but a being who stops being trampled on and begins to use their sensitivity as a weapon, not to destroy, but to expose, not to shout, but to illuminate. And the others? The others find themselves naked on the sun, with their lies dripping away like melted wax. You'd expect that once the outburst has passed, you'd go back to being a meek sheep. But no! Metamorphosis has no undo button. Once you've stopped apologizing for existing, it doesn't come naturally to you to start over. It's as if someone burned the old you's manual. No more endless justifications, no more worn knees from kneeling before others. Jung, his pen almost piercing the paper, described this transformation as the most permanent of internal revolutions. Not a fleeting moment, not a nervous breakdown, but a new state of being. Empaths who had reached this point never looked back. It wasn't a storm, it was a change of climate. And the results were terrifying for those who had lived exploiting their kindness. Toxic relationships cut down like dead wood. Manipulative families left to dry in the sun. Predatory colleagues unmasked with a single glance. All without hysteria, without shouting, without melodrama. Pure social surgery. Others saw them enter a room and felt an inexplicable thrill like vampires at sunrise. There was not even a need to defend themselves. Just being there was enough, and the predator sensed danger and moved away. Jung called it the inverted predator instinct, when someone who has always been hunted develops such an aura that hunters understand on a primal level that it's not worth trying. And this isn't because you become cruel, but because for the first time, you no longer need anyone. Once you've made the leap, you're no longer a public fountain where anyone can come and drink. You become a dam with controlled floodgates. You decide when to open and to whom. Jung observed this metamorphosis with dismay and noted that integrated empaths become as selective as generals at war. They no longer squander energy on anyone who cries loudly enough. They dose it like a rare coin, invested only in those who prove worthy.
The result: others perceive your calm as a threat. You don't shout, you don't get agitated, you don't seek approval, you're simply present. And this presence, so devoid of need, triggers panic in manipulators. You strip them of all their tricks. They can no longer hook you with their usual traps because you recognize them from a distance, like a hunter sniffing the wind before entering the forest. And here's the detail that really made Jung tremble: the dark potential. Because with the same precision with which you can heal, you can also destroy. You've recorded weaknesses, fears, and lies for years. You could use them as weapons. But most awakened empaths don't. They don't need revenge. They just need to move on. And yet the simple knowledge that you could strike, that you possess the entire archive of other people's vulnerabilities, makes you frighteningly powerful. You're no longer a victim. You're no longer sacrificed meat. You've become what Jung called a psychologically inviolable individual. And in that moment, society as a whole changes its attitude. Some look at you with admiration, others with fear, still others with resentment. But everyone, without exception, feels that you are no longer manipulable. Imagine standing before an old medieval chessboard. Others move pieces randomly, thinking they're playing checkers. You, however, know every opening, every trap, every endgame. Transformed empaths become exactly that: silent strategists. They don't just protect themselves, they read social dynamics like sheet music. You see a group, a company, a family, and in moments you spot the knots, the puppeteers, the marionettes, and the strings that connect them. Jung, almost with awe, noted that they become architects of the inner world of others. No longer passive absorbers of pain, but engineers who build and demolish psychological structures. And they do so with a precision that borders on the supernatural, yet remains entirely human. Because their secret is not magic. It is extreme attention accumulated over years of silent survival. This new condition makes them immune to manipulation. There's no gaslighting that can stop them. You see the trick before it's played out. No abuse can take root. You recognize the strategy at the first move. It's as if you've received a definitive vaccine against lies. The paradox? This same power that could devastate actually heals. Because instead of overwhelming others with what you know, you use it to create safe spaces, authentic connections, relationships based on truth. If you've recognized yourself so far, stop for a moment, leave a like and write it in the comments. Yet those who meet you sense it. You are different. There's no longer any need for proclamations, defenses, or shields. Your surgical calm is enough to expose the fragility of others. And so you effortlessly become a kind of burning mirror, reflecting with such clarity that those who don't want to see themselves flee on their own. Once transformed, you don't become a solitary monk atop a mountain or a vengeful tyrant. You return to the world, but you do so with a different arsenal. Jung described it as the natural return to service, but in reality, it's more like a silent military campaign. You choose the fronts, decide the battles, decide who deserves your care and who should stay outside the walls. Integrated empaths never stop loving, but they learn to do so with a scalpel, not a bucket of water. If you were once the emotional plumber for anyone with a leak, now you're a selective architect. You dedicate your gift only to those who build with you. The others, those who hope to suck you dry, find the door closed. And there's no point arguing. Your absence alone is enough to bring down the entire theater of their manipulation. Jung, in his most private notes, observed that awakened empaths become multipliers of resilience. They don't just survive, they create networks. They help other empaths stop being sacrificial victims, demonstrating that sensitivity is not a curse, but a weapon to be carefully honed. Thus, from isolated and crushed individuals, they transform into a silent army that reshapes the dynamics around them. The result? Dysfunctional families implode because they no longer have a scapegoat available. Manipulators reveal themselves like vampires burning in the sun. The authentic ones, however, get stronger. Your presence becomes a guarantee of safety. There's no need for sermons. You are the living sermon. And it was here that Jung experienced his worst thrill. He understood that these empaths were not sick people to be cured, but prototypes of a future humanity. Not victims, not fodder for psychoanalysis, but pioneers. People who can feel everything without being destroyed by anything. Jung, his hand trembling over the paper, wrote that these individuals represent the most frightening and fascinating evolutionary step. They are neither saints nor demons, but beings who walk on a knife's edge, capable of boundless compassion and at the same time a cutting coldness. It's as if a healer and an executioner coexist within you, and you decide which one to release. The difference from the past? The choice is conscious. You are no longer at the mercy of other people's emotions. You are no longer possessed by guilt or the need for acceptance. Now you can love without annihilating yourself, and you can strike without hatred. Your empathy has become surgery, no longer a hemorrhage. Jung called it perfect empathy. Not blind, not naive, but sharp as a scalpel. You are gentle with those who deserve it, implacable with those who try to exploit you. It's not revenge, it's justice. It's not anger, it's balance. And this balance is what terrifies manipulators, because they no longer have levers to pull, no more buttons to push. The world around you is changing radically. Some avoid you as if you were carrying the plague. Others seek you out as if you were a sacred relic. You no longer act to please, but by choice. You are no longer less human. You are more human than everyone else because you can finally live without invisible chains. And then you understand what Jung both feared and hoped for, that your sensitivity, your supposed weakness, was never a flaw. It was a blade wrapped in tissue paper, and when you unwrapped it, you became a perfect tightrope walker, someone who can dance between love and strength without ever falling.
Here's the truth Jung bequeathed to his most secret notebooks. Empaths are not born victims, but unknowingly trained warriors. They spent years collecting scars like copper coins, only to discover that the rusty metal was actually hardened steel. Once the transformation occurs, they never go back. They no longer ask for permission to exist. They no longer wait to be saved. They simply choose who to be. And this is their greatest strength. Not the shout, not the sword, not the rage, but the icy calm of those who finally know they have nothing left to prove. The manipulators flee, the authentic ones stay, and you become the deciding factor in every system you enter. Because you are no longer the carpet on which others wipe their feet. You are the floor itself, and those who cannot walk straight stumble alone. This is the silent revolution of awakened empaths. They are not comic book superheroes or martyrs to be crucified. They are complete human beings, capable of loving without losing themselves and defending themselves without hating. And if you're listening to this, perhaps you recognize within yourself the same flame that Jung saw in his patients. The question isn't whether you'll explode one day. The question is whether you'll choose to do so consciously, transforming your sensitivity into strength or letting life twist it into chaos. If you've made it this far, it means the seed of awakening has already been planted. And that's precisely why I ask you. Leave a like because I'll know you've recognized your own shadow transforming into light. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced that moment of inner clarity so others won't feel alone on their journey. Subscribe to the channel because this isn't a one-time only fairy tale. It's a journey that requires increasingly clear eyes. Thank you for sharing this piece of the journey. May you carry your empathy no longer as a chain, but as a sharp blade, capable of defending and enlightening. See you on the next journey into the human mind. Until then, stay awake, stay whole, stay dangerously alive. Jung remained obsessed with this metamorphosis. In his journals, he wrote that awakened empaths become the worst nightmare for manipulators and the greatest hope for those seeking authenticity. In essence, you are a living seismograph. You detect emotional tremors before the earthquake strikes. Predators sense it, smell it, and change course. Others, the real ones, can finally breathe without fear because they know that next to you, lies won't take root. The next step he called return to service. You don't lock yourself away in a monastery. You don't disappear into the woods. You remain among the people, but on a different level. You are no longer the village's emotional dump. You have become a filter. Your empathy no longer flows freely like a raging river that devastates everything, but is measured, channeled, used with the precision of a hydraulic engineer. You give it to those who build, not to those who drain you. And with this simple act, you overturn entire family, social, and professional systems. And Jung, with his obsessive handwriting, admitted to being troubled by one thought. If every betrayed empath underwent this transformation, the power dynamics of society as a whole would be rewritten.
because those who can no longer be manipulated automatically become free, and a manipulator without victims is just a clown with broken strings. Transformed empaths become perfect tightrope walkers, he wrote. They don't give up love, but they don't give it away to just anyone. They don't give up tenderness, but they offer it only to those who don't mistake it for weakness. They don't give up strength, but they use it without hatred. A balance so rare, it seems dangerous, and perhaps it is. For those who live by lies, your surgical calm is a slow execution. Ultimately, the truth is this: you haven't changed. You've always been this way. It's just that before, you hid the knife of your lucidity behind the sheath of fear. Now, you wield it without trembling. Jung understood this better than anyone. The empath's tragedy is not their sensitivity, but the time they waste before honoring it. Jung, now at the end of his career, observed his patients like someone scrutinizing a new mythological animal. No longer trembling victims, but creatures capable of feeling without breaking. And he noted with a mixture of wonder and awe, they have not become less empathetic, they have become perfectly empathetic, which means they have stopped wasting tears on those who didn't deserve them and have begun to shed them, if at all, only a selective dew on those who truly knew how to guard them. It was no longer dispersive sensitivity. It was a sharp blade, a caress on one side, a clean cut on the other. And this blade, held in the hand of someone who had been tied to the gallows for years, completely changed the scene. You were no longer the rag absorbing the village dirt. You had become the standard bearer who decides who deserves protection and who must rot in their lies. Jung feared it, but at the same time he recognized it. It was an evolutionary leap, a new stage in the human psyche. The awakened empaths became living mirrors. They didn't need to accuse anyone. Their mere presence reflected the psychic garbage of others. The manipulators writhed, false saints revealed themselves, liars betrayed themselves. And meanwhile, the authentic ones finally breathed, free from the stale air of social theater. It was what Jung called the empath's mirror effect, not an act of denunciation, but a reflection in which everyone saw themselves, whether they liked it or not. Here lies the most disturbing point. This transformation is not optional. Jung understood it, and his pen wrote it like a verdict. The empath will break. The question is how. Either you break silently, becoming an empty shell, or you break consciously, transforming your cracks into slits through which light shines. There is no third way. And every empath, once or another, will reach that crossroads. And so it all comes down to a brutal choice. Either let life trample you until it suddenly snaps, or choose when and how to integrate your shadow. Because the truth, what manipulators fear like fire, is that empathy has never been weakness. It was a blade wrapped in the tissue paper of social conventions. When you stop apologizing and discard it, you become love with boundaries, capable of embracing, but also of rejecting without hesitation. Jung concluded with an observation his colleagues found too uncomfortable to discuss openly. Empaths were not created to suffer, but to evolve the collective consciousness. They are the pioneers of a future psychology, beings who demonstrate that one can feel everything without being destroyed by anything. Not sacrificial victims, not martyrs to be canonized, but forces of nature that choose who to grant access to and who to close the door to. So I know you're not just another saint willing to get beat up for free. Let me know in the comments when you've stopped being a doormat so we can raise a glass together. And if you don't subscribe, don't worry. Jung would say it's just your shadow talking for you.